Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is three-time Pulitzer Prize winner, Edward Albee. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Albee.
Good.
Edward. May I call you Edward?
Please.
Okay. Again, it's just an incredible thrill for me to talk to somebody with, your history in the theater.
Now, we've talked before.
We've talked a long time ago back in
Tahlequah.
In Tahlequah, which
I was up there 2 years in a row for a month at a time.
I know. We loved it.
I had a great time up there.
We love to hear that Tahlequah is regarded as an art center and a literary center.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that, though, and certainly you were.
Is that? Have you been there lately?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that wonderful sign, the big sign with the horse on it? Is that still there?
Absolutely.
That was wonderful.
That is absolutely.
Marvelous sign.
Absolutely. And there's also another sign in Tahlequah. It says, "Are you sure you couldn't find it in Tahlequah?" And somebody painted out. Find it, and it says, "Are you sure you couldn't find Tahlequah?" So, but we're there, and you know we're there, and we were honored to have you among us. The first of your plays to actually be produced was The Zoo Story in Berlin. Why Berlin?
Well, because there was no off-Broadway then, and it was an grumpy hour-long play by an author that nobody had ever heard of, and nobody wanted to do that in a big theater in New York. And there wasn't much off-Broadway then, where, serious plays should be done. And some friends of mine sent it around to people around the world, and all of a sudden, the Germans decided they wanted to do it. It was translated and put on in West Berlin, because it was a West Berlin then, on a double bill with Sam Beckett's play, Krapp's Last Tape, which I thought was a good way to begin.
Absolutely. What was it like hearing your play in German?
Well, I don't know any German. I mean, I've refused to learn the language. You can't learn a language where the verbs are at the ends of the sentences. That shouldn't be allowed. But I knew the play perfectly well. I'd written it. I knew every single word. The actors were good. And so it was like every other production. Opening night is always difficult.
You've said that after that opening night, opening nights no longer exist for you, they happen. Give us a sense.
I'll tell you, I don't go to them anymore.
You don't?
No.
What do you do?
Well, about 5 or 6 days before opening, I figured out it's either going to be okay or it isn't. The actors are going to remember their lines or they're not. The set's going to fall down or it isn't. The critics will be intelligent or stupid. The audiences will be there if they want. There's nothing I can do about it. So I go to a movie on opening night.
And then check the reviews late that evening?
Well, you don't get the reviews anymore late that evening. And the only reason, for the most part, I read reviews is not to find out how I'm practicing my craft, unfortunately. It's to find out how long the play is going to run, whether I have to get a job or not.
Because it's a matter of business now, isn't it?
Yeah, right, so for the most part.
Speaking of reviewers, a nun once wrote about The Zoo Story that your characters of Peter and Jerry were based, she thought, on Peter and Jesus. Now, was that your intent at all? Were you as surprised by that as a lot of people were?
I wasn't as surprised as I was supposed to be, because there are a couple of Christian references in the play. There are a couple of references where the character Jerry is saying things that might give people the idea that there might be some reference there. And it came to pass that the beast was deathly ill.
Yes.
And when he sees the knife that he's about to run on, he puts his arms wide, and the stage direction says, like in a crucifixion, and it says, "So be it," and runs on the knife. So, if that critic had read the play, then maybe that was justification. But no, the characters are not Peter and Jesus, but there are hints here and there that you should think about the character of Jerry not as an insane man, but maybe as somebody too sane.
You know, critics agree everywhere that you have a wonderful command of the language, a great insight into your characters, even if they don't like your plot sometimes. they agree about that. Did you ever give any thought to becoming a novelist or a poet?
I started out being a poet when I was 10. I didn't get much better in 20 years, so I stopped. I wrote 2 novels in my teens, which I like to think are the 2 worst novels to ever be written by an American teenager. And I didn't do the short stories very well. And so eventually when I was 28, I changed things and started writing plays, and that's worked out a little better.
Well, we mentioned earlier that The Zoo Story was your first play. It's the first play that was produced. You had written some plays prior to that.
Well, I wrote a 3-act sex farce when I was 14.
I'd love to read that. Would you like to see that produced? That would be
Never.
fun. Who were some of the playwrights that inspired you early on?
Every single playwright ever experienced. Start with Sophocles, go right straight up to Sam Beckett, and you've got all of them. You're influenced by everything, by what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you learn that's good, what you learn that's bad. I tell my students, read a lot of bad plays. It's terribly encouraging.
What kind of quick take can you give us on Arthur Miller?
Well, there's not much quick there anymore, since Arthur is not quick anymore. He's dead. He was a good, sincere writer, cared about our society, cared about people a lot, and he wrote responsible, serious, good plays.
What about Eugene?
I enjoyed him. I enjoyed being with him. I liked Arthur a lot. Maybe more than he liked me, I don't know.
What about Eugene O'Neill?
Well, for somebody who really couldn't write very well, and that was Eugene's problem, he couldn't write very well, and he admitted it himself. I'm not a very good writer, he said. Some of his plays, the early ones, the sea plays, and the late ones when about his family, those were good plays. But in the middle, he got trapped with all that Greek mythology stuff, and the plays are pretty boring.
Tennessee Williams.
Well, what do you say about Tennessee? At his best, very few people could write as well. Yeah, he had a few problems.
Well, who doesn't?
Yeah, well, some of us recover from them, some don't.
Some don't. And in that sense, his life was tragic, I suppose. What about Lillian Hellman?
I think she was one of the worst things ever happened to American theater.
Why so?
Well, because she was a liar and a cheat and
all that controversy. Yeah, Mary
stuff.
McCarthy and
yeah, I mean, she just no excuse for her.
One of our contemporary playwrights, Tracy Letts, was recently on the show and talked about some advice you had for him. Edward Albee's a big fan of yours, and I understand he had some advice for you.
He did. You know, I received an award from the New York Theater Critics Circle. They give an annual award, one to a musical and one to a play, and this year I was delighted to receive the award for Best Play. I was surprised that Mr. Albee presented the award. I didn't know that was going to happen, and he said, as he presented the award, that he said he had heard these comparisons to O'Neill as well as to his own work. And he said, don't listen to any of that, Tracy. He said, your work is very much your own. It's very specific to you. It's not like other people's. It's your own. It can be a danger to listen to too many of those comparisons. So I appreciated him saying that.
He's been doing very nicely for himself, hasn't he?
Yes, it has. Do you go to a lot of openings now? Not yours.
I don't
but
like
others.
openings at all. I never go to openings, but I go to a lot of plays. Unfortunately, I have to go to more than I want to because I'm a voter for the Tony Awards. And so I have to see all this stuff if I'm going to try to get the awards for the good stuff.
Well, you certainly won so many accolades, 3 Tony Awards, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then one special Tony is a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Which is premature.
Well, the only other person awarded that was, Arthur Miller was the only other person historically to get a playwright to. I think so. I
don't pay as much attention to this stuff as I'm supposed to.
Well, I just wondered about the importance of awards in theater.
Look, if they're out there, it's nice to get them. Yeah. But you shouldn't go around hoping for them or wanting them.
And certainly you've gotten your share of those. I mentioned Tracy Letts. He's an actor as well as a playwright. Were you ever interested in acting?
Oh, I did a lot of it when I was a kid, yeah. But when I got thrown out of college, that was the end of my acting career.
You had never had any aspirations to go on stage, like on Broadway or?
No.
We were talking about.
I mean, I was good, but I didn't care.
You just care. You were the playwright. You never.
Yeah, but I knew I was a good actor, but it didn't interest me that much.
And to be an actor, you really have to have a lot of drive. You have to really want to be that, is it?
Well, it's a tough racket. And given the state of American theater, you're going to be in rotten plays far more than good ones, since that's what people want to see, bad plays.
Well, and you know, that's a sad commentary on the state of the arts right now, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more.
Not only right now, but throughout history.
Absolutely, you're right. We were talking about Tennessee Williams earlier, and one thing that you two shared, in addition to being wonderful playwrights, was an admiration for Carson McCullers. And Carson was one of my favorite writers. I'm a huge Carson McCullers fan, and you have referred to her as a curious magician, and I wondered if you might elaborate on that.
I wonder what I meant by that.
I don't know. That's a
I said that a long time ago, and I don't remember.
I ran across that.
I don't remember why I said it. But she was a magician, and she was curious. I guess that's it.
That's it. We found it. We've solved it right now. Well, you adapted her novella, Ballad of the Sad Cafe.
Yes, I did.
When you're adapting another author's work, what kinds of creative boundaries do you have to draw?
Well, when I did that adaptation of Carson's Ballad of the Sad Cafe, I tried to write the play that she would have written had she been me. It's as close as I can come to it.
Did it ever get touchy between the two of you? Was she territorial?
No, Carson liked very much the adaptation that I did. She would have been happier, she told me, if it had run for 5 years. But then again, so would I. We got about 6 months out of it. That was nice.
So,
Colleen Dewhurst was in it, and she was wonderful. And a marvelous young dwarf actor named Michael Dunn.
Oh, yes, he was good. I remember him from the movie The Ship of Fools.
That's right.
He was excellent.
He died young, unfortunately.
Excellent actor. First of your plays to open on Broadway was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that opening, you wrote that it was going to be a big test, but you weren't quite sure why. Now, 40-plus years later, do you have a better sense of why?
Why it was a big hit? Well, A, it's a good play.
Mm-hmm.
B, it was considered rather shocking at the time. And it was about very interesting people, intelligent people who had a sense of humor, who stayed up late and drank.
I like them.
Yeah.
They were my kind of
they
people.
were fun.
In fact, you've described Martha as one of the most complete characters in theater, that she's worthy of empathy.
You know, it's interesting. Everybody concentrates on Martha. But the play is really owned by George, by her husband. He motivates, he moves the entire play, he controls the action. He's the only one who stays sober throughout the play, by the way.
That's interesting.
He has only 2 drinks in the whole course of the evening. And the character of George is easily as important as Martha, but he's not as flashy as Martha.
Right.
So, you know,
and
everybody prefers actresses to actors anyway.
Do you think that's true?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. How well did you think that Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor did in the film adaptation?
Well, considering the fact that she was 20 years too young for the role and he was 10 years too old, I guess it was okay.
The film is certainly well received. Were you involved with it at all in the production of it?
Only to the extent that there's no screenplay, though one was credited to the producer. There's no screenplay, and almost every single word on the screen is mine. I wrote it. I wrote the damn thing. So, yeah, I was involved.
Yeah.
I didn't sit around watching the shooting because I'd been promised a different cast when I sold it to Warner Brothers. Jack Warner told me there was going to be Bette Davis and James Mason.
Oh, that would have been interesting, wouldn't it?
Well, it would have been, everybody would have been the right age. And if you remember early on in my play, Martha does an imitation of Bette Davis. It would have been real fun to see it in the film and watch Bette Davis do a Bette Davis imitation. I wonder if she could have done it well.
I don't know. What a missed opportunity, though.
I know.
That's one of those rare things that we could have made that happen.
Well, Burton and Taylor were getting married and divorced all the time, and they were bigger stars, so.
Yeah, and it was really about box office at that point, wasn't it?
Sure,
the commercial heads were kind of
That's what film is all about in America.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that some more later. You've said that people that view Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf more as a love story than a tragedy are closer to the reality.
Well, these are people who do love each other, George and Martha certainly, and they screwed up their relationship pretty badly. I don't know whether by the end of the play they have the courage and the guts to go ahead and whether they can save the marriage or not. I don't know. That's why I stopped the play where I did, I guess.
There have been several revivals of Virginia Woolf, some on Broadway.
I directed a production on Broadway with Colleen Dewhurst and Ben Gazzara.
Oh, that was
got really good reviews. And the most recent production on Broadway was with Kathleen Turner and Bill Irwin. And that was a wonderful production, probably as close to the original production with Luther Hagen and Arthur Hill that we could have gotten.
Can actors change your perception of your characters?
No. Only if they do something wrong.
Right. And then as the playwright, is there much you can do about that?
Yes, fire them.
Fire them. And have you done that?
Sure.
Okay, can you give us a good example of that?
Nope. I could, but I'm not going to.
Good. You've got good litigators, so you understand what we can and can't do. You've made the comment from time to time. It's very strange how playwrights are often identified with one particular play, not necessarily their best. Do you think that you will most often be linked to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I don't know. The zoo story, a lot of people talk about a lot, especially since I've made it into a 2-act play now.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, I'm getting a lot of productions of A Delicate Balance. I'm getting an awful lot of productions of The Goater, who is Sylvia. But then again, there aren't many plays around about a man having a love affair with a goat.
You mentioned something very important about the zoo story, that you actually went back and wrote another act for that. What was that like for you as an artist to go back and revisit your play? Is that something you always knew you were going to do? I
always knew I was going to do it. I just didn't know where I'd get around to doing it. I always thought that the character of Peter was not three-dimensional enough. He was sort of a backboard for everything that Jerry was talking about. And I knew there was a first act there, Peter at home with his wife Anne, before he went to the zoo, before he went to the park, and was accosted by Jerry. I got busy, so I didn't write it for a long time. But when I did write it, it took me 2 weeks.
So it had been building up.
I still had it in my head somehow, even though I hadn't written it. I still knew over all those years, over 40 years, what I should be doing. And so it went very quickly.
And now, as I understand it, you won't let the play be performed unless both acts are performed.
Well, because everybody tells me that this is much better.
How good a sense do you have, Edward, of what works and doesn't work in your own writing?
Technically pretty good. Yeah, I know when something works or whether it doesn't work. What I can't tell is whether people want to involve themselves in it or not. That's what I can't tell.
You know, one of the things I was noticing as I was rereading Virginia Woolf and Delicate Balance and all of your plays over the last few weeks are all of the annotations that you have here, the notes to actors, to directors, to set designers. How important are they to the play?
Well, the ones that are in the text, they merely inform the director and the actors what I heard when I was writing the play, how I heard the characters speaking. And if they would be polite enough, please, to perform the play as I heard it and saw it, you'll have a much happier author.
Sometimes do you change your view, though, after you go and see a play, and it wasn't exactly the way you envisioned, but you think, you know, I really like it this way. This is good.
I can honestly say that I've never seen a performance in a play of mine that differed greatly from what I'd seen when I wrote the play that I liked as much or think worked as well.
Who's been your favorite director?
Aside from me, I'm a very good director of my own work, too. Oh, there have been some good ones, a number of good ones. Anthony Page is a very fine director. There have been a lot of them. I'm very fortunate. I've had many good directors and a couple of rotten ones.
We tend to think of all of your successes because there have been so many. Have there been some times in your career when the good reviews didn't come, when you got very discouraged?
Well, there are lots of times when the good reviews don't come, but that shouldn't discourage you. I just go right on.
Did they challenge you in a way?
No, I just figure out whether these people who don't like the plays have any reason to be paid any attention to.
That's a good lesson. Did you know that right from the beginning, or did you have to learn that?
I think I knew it from the beginning, yeah. When I wrote the zoo story, my first play, I knew that it was the first thing that I'd ever written that was really good. I knew that.
Just knew it instinctively.
Yeah, I mean, I educated myself. I had a good education. And I knew what was good in the arts and what was trash. And when I wrote the zoo story, I knew I'd written something that was worthwhile.
Did you wonder, though, how it would be received?
No, I never worry about that. I never wanted to be an employee. And I never wanted to write for other people. I mean, for their approval.
Isn't that the lesson that we all have to learn if you're really interested in writing? You think too many people write for approval?
They write for an audience. They write to be accepted and to be so-called successful, economically successful. That's not what the arts are all about. The arts are, saying something useful, saying it truthfully. And if people don't like it, tough.
Did that get easier for you? I mean, you've written
It's never been hard.
Just always came naturally. What are some of the most important things you've learned as a playwright?
Trust yourself. Be sure that you're doing good work. Be sure that you're not lying to yourself or to other people.
The lying to yourself is always the trickiest part, isn't it?
That's the hardest one to figure out, yeah.
Yeah, and that sometimes takes years to find out.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a biography written about you called Edward Albee, A Singular Journey. Were you involved with this project?
Oh, sure. The critic who wrote that, Mel Gusso, was a good friend of mine. He was a very, very good critic. He was basically responsible for getting the attention to off-Broadway that it deserved.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fine off-Broadway critic, and he cared about serious theater. He and I worked together 2 or 3 years. I mean, I didn't tell him what to write. He showed me what he was writing as it was going along. I think there were only 2 little times when I said, no, you shouldn't publish that because it's not quite true or could be misunderstood. But he was intelligent, and if you're going to have a biography written about you, it should be straightforward, honest, and complete. And Mel was able to do that.
Did you go back and read the biography after you finished it?
Oh, sure.
Were there any parts of it that surprised you? Did you learn anything about yourself from the biography?
Oh, probably, but I can't remember now.
So you don't need.
The only problem is Mel died about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I guess he's not going to write volume 2.
No.
Because I go on, even though
Absolutely, and
the biography ends about 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Have you ever thought about doing a memoir?
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Well, you do that. We're going to talk about your essays in the second segment, but what do you look, when you see a biography like this, and it's hard to catch, what do you see as the pivotal moments in your early career?
Oh, a whole bunch of things. Getting a really good education in private schools, really good education, learning how to educate yourself, understanding that individuality is important in spite of other people's desire for you to conform. That your identity, individuality, pursuit of what you need to pursue.
Were you pressured at all by your family to pursue another profession?
Yeah, sure. Not any particular one, but almost anything except creative writing, of course.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about a conference where we were with Howard Nemeroff, and his father was just horrified that he was a poet, and it wasn't until he received an award designating him a man of letters that his father suddenly took pride in his work.
My adoptive mother never liked anything I wrote, but toward the end of her life, when she was getting sort of gaga, she would always introduce me to her friends as, do you know my son, Edward Albee, the playwright? Even though she hated my work. It was fun.
Have you gotten accustomed to the fame? Because there has been so much written about you. People are, since word came out that you were going to be in Tulsa, we've got so many calls, people wanting to meet you, wanting to hear what you have to say. Do you ever get used to that? Does it ever surprise you at all?
Yeah, it constantly surprises me. It constantly surprises me that anybody knows who I am or what I do.
Even after all these years,
yeah,
even after 3 Pulitzer Prizes.
I mean, you know, one is not a rock star.
Well, in the literary world, you kind of are.
Yeah, but listen, I suppose I can wander around New York City, the island of Manhattan anyway, and a lot of people are going to recognize me. But if I get, 30 miles out, nobody knows who I am. That's fine.
What are some of the misconceptions about you? Some of the people that, are sitting off in universities and analyzing your work and your life and your career. What are some of the most
Everybody always says with great surprise, but your plays are so funny. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that because I think tragedy and comedy are so terribly close together.
Absolutely they are. And I've got to tell you, when I was reading The Goat this weekend, I laughed and laughed. I thought that was one of the funniest.
Until you stopped laughing, I hope. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, it has some twist. But some of those lines in there were really,
of course
really
it's funny. Because the situation is funny.
Yeah.
And I do have a sense of humor.
Yeah. Do you amuse yourself when you're writing?
Of course.
Oh, good. Good.
Sure.
Because
you hear me chuckling away sometimes.
Because we hear so many stories, about the artist that's just always in angst and tormented and all of that. But you've lived a good life.
No, I don't understand all this angst nonsense.
Is that self-indulgent with writers, do you think?
No, some people are tortured. Some people have tortured souls. Some people haven't learned the needed objectivity that you have to have about what you're doing and about who you are and about everything else. You have to have that objectivity. And some people only write about themselves. I've never written about me. Some people only write about themselves, and they think they know who they are, but they usually don't.
Why do you think that reviewers, why do you think that professors are always wanting to make every play that someone writes or every novel someone writes autobiographical?
Because they've been trained to think that way. It's stupid, but they've been trained to think that way.
And you know, they will say, well, it is autobiographical, you just don't realize it's autobiographical. Do you like that kind of
Look,
thing?
you know when you're writing that you're using every source that you possibly can. You're using people you know, you're using your own reaction to things, you're inventing, you're doing all sorts of stuff. But as I say, I've never written about me. I've written through me. But I'm not a character in any of my plays.
Do you think that's one of the mistakes that Truman Capote made, was that he wrote too much about himself? And
Well, no, Truman stopped writing anything that mattered, except that awful last book. And he became a celebrity and a star. And that interested him far more than being a serious writer toward the end, unfortunately.
well, unfortunately for us, we're out of time, but thankfully, Mr. Albee's agreed to stay with us for a second segment. Thank you, Edward, for being here, and thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.